Well, hello everybody and welcome to my show. My name is Christopher Kringle and this is Santa Claus Musings. Just wanted to rant for a little while as I ho my way to work. I wanted to talk about the muddy waters of Christian theology and why on earth anyone would ever choose to stay in such a system, right? And cling to such a system. Now, I'm not knocking you if this is what you really want to do, right? If it's really your desire to stay in such a system that really makes A, no sense, and B, has so many arguments stacked up against it, it's not even funny, then that's fine, right? I mean, I guess people sometimes want to cling to the faith thing and just say, yeah, I have faith, that's it. I don't care what people say. I don't care how logically you want to approach the Bible. I don't care how ironclad your arguments are when it comes to using the Bible. I'm going to believe regardless of anything you say. Okay, I don't care if Jesus hops on a freaking unicorn, flies down here, smacks me over the head with a broom and says, hey, I'm not coming back. It's not about you. Okay, I'm still going to believe it, right? And that's how a lot of people are, unfortunately. But I like to kind of rant and talk about logical things and approach life from a logical, critical type of standpoint where I look at things and I look at the body of proof and the evidence for certain things and I evaluate in my head rigorously how likely it is for them to be true or relevant or whatever the case may be. And I am my own biggest critic in that if I believe something, I'm going to do anything I can to try to disprove it, because I just don't want to be caught up in a lie. I don't want to be caught up in a religion. I don't want to be caught up in a system that is going to rob me of anything that this life has to offer. And, the Christian may look at that and say, well, you got it bass-ackwards. It's all about what's coming in the afterlife. This life doesn't mean jack shit. Right? Well, that's the typical argument, right? This is not our home. We're just pilgrims or sojourners wandering through. But no, actually, this is my home. This is my home. I'm a human. I live on planet Earth. And I have a life. And I enjoy my life. And I'm going to enjoy my life, regardless of if it's for 10 more years or 50. Doesn't matter. So I don't look at things bass-ackwardsly, okay? I look at them normally, like a normal human should. I live now, okay? This is my life. I'm not going to look at some book and think that I'm cursed and think that this life means nothing. This life that Christians say is such a blessing on one hand, right? Oh, it's such a blessing to be here and we're so blessed and all this and the other. Then on the other hand, they'll say, oh, everybody's cursed and everyone's vile and everyone's wicked and this life doesn't matter. It's all about the next life. I mean, the contradictions just abound. But back to the topic at hand, the muddy, mucky system that is Christianity. Think about all the arguments against it from a theological standpoint. You got Israel only, which is the most ironclad system to date, okay? What it does, and I should say full preterist, or preterism Israel only, or covenant Israel only, or whatever you want to call it, but just the concept that blends the fulfilled fact that Jesus came back when he said he would with the fact that the Gentiles that needed salvation, the ones that were out in the nations, the lost sheep, were dispersed Israelites, whom Jesus said he only came for. That system right there is just an ironclad bulldog, okay? And it's just blowing other theological viewpoints to bits. And it has been now for 2 years or so when I started sharing this stuff. And so nobody has any arguments for it, okay? And what happens is, when people try to argue it, what they do is they cling to a couple of passages and they ignore the thousands of passages that Israel only uses to make its case. They say, You've just ranted for an hour and used 500 scriptures, all from the New Testament, that clearly say this was all about Israel. But here's one. Here's one for you. And they say, look, this is our ticket, right? This is our golden ticket. This is the passage that God wanted us to find so that we might have a little bit of a foothold in this story. But that's ridiculous, right? I don't know if you guys watch Dateline, but I talk about Dateline a bit. And I enjoy Dateline. I watch it quite a bit. And with Dateline, usually as they're building up the case, what happens is you see, different characters emerge in the story. What's his name? Oh man, what the heck's his name? The skinny guy with the white hair with the mysterious voice. He comes on and he says, oh, there was a man. He drove by the house. But did he? That kind of thing, right? And so you get these different characters popping up. She made a call to her cousin, who said he was in Louisville for the night. Or was he? So you're getting these different characters, and in your mind, you're kind of observing and weighing out all the evidence, and you're saying, wow, that's pretty damning, right? I mean, there's got to be something to it, right? And so the evidence is building. And the evidence is building against a person, right? In the Dateline segment, right? Or Dateline episode. It's building against the main bad guy. But then, every once in a while, Dateline throws a little spin on it and says, well, he does have this that proves that he may not have been there. In other words, they throw in one little piece of evidence that could kind of throw the audience a little bit so that keeps you wondering, right? Well, but at the end of the day, what happens in court and what happens when that trial goes to court is the bad guy gets roasted and toasted, right? And why is that? Well, because evidence, okay? Preponderance of evidence is heavily in the favor of this guy having done the crime. Okay, it doesn't matter if you have, one little thing that says, oh, he might have been over here, or two little points that may make it seem like he didn't commit the crime. You have 50 other points that say explicitly that he did commit the crime. And so what happens when it goes to court is that it's proved that this man is a murderer, because the evidence is so freaking heavy in favor of that conclusion. And likewise, with Israel only in the Bible, the evidence is so flipping heavy in favor of that conclusion that it's not even funny. So when people try to cling to a passage here or a passage there, all while ignoring the passages everywhere, they're making a big mistake. And so with that in mind, I want you to now think and consider about how ridiculous it is for someone to cling to this system after having seen all of the arguments that literally obliterate it, right? I mean, talk about mucky and muddy and no concrete foundation. That's what this has become. There is literally nothing concrete about it. Nobody has any proof that they have the Holy Spirit. Nobody can do any miracles. Nobody has any gifts, right? I mean, Joe Simpson commented recently on one of my YouTube audios and said that he's in healing, prophetic healing training. He's learning how to heal people with the Holy Spirit, right? So he's training for it. Can you picture him like running up the steps in Philadelphia like Rocky Balboa with the music on, and as he's running up the steps, he's sprinkling Holy Spirit fairy dust on people and they're being healed. Like, this is the stuff that these people actually think is going on. You guys all remember where Paul was, conducting seminars at the Jewish Convention Center and having people come in and, teaching them how to heal properly and how to do better healings and be a more productive healer. You remember that, right? No? Yeah, good, because it never happened. Yet here's Joe in 2019. He's training to become a healer. It's good stuff. But none of this stuff makes any sense. None of it. Then you have the whole, futurist gang who clings to this future return of Christ, which is clearly not happening. I mean, I can remember 30 years ago when I was a kid, or 25 years ago, my parents would say, oh, Jesus is coming soon. Well, that never happened, and it's not happening. Okay, you look at everything that goes on in the world, and you say, oh, look, this is proof that he's coming, it's happening soon, blah, 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 but it never happens. And it won't happen because he already came. That's the whole point of the story. He already came. Okay, so you have that aspect of it where the fulfilled problem comes into view. So now you have to cling on to something knowing that it's both fulfilled and knowing that it's all about Israel only. And you're clinging on to that system because you have a couple of passages that might suggest something that goes against the other billion passages that suggest the contrary. Do you see how the concrete foundation that you once thought Christianity was is crumbling right before your eyes? And furthermore, why would anybody want to put faith in such a story that makes so little sense, right? It makes no sense. Given the relevance and how it applies to modern day society, it makes absolutely no sense. It's outdated, it's irrelevant, it's ancient, and it doesn't make any sense. So why would anybody want to put faith in that? Is it just because it's an old ancient book? Is it just because it's got a lot of, esteem over the centuries? Is it just because it's sort of like the thing to do, the status quo in terms of American religion? I mean, what's the fascination with it? I understand how people can come into it like I did. That's kind of like your family and what you do, and you have a little experience in life with a divine being or spiritual experience, and you just don't know where to take it, so you take it to the book. I understand that. I know how that works. But when people show people these things, why do they insist on clinging? Why aren't they taking notice of how mucky and muddy this story really is when you factor in all the problems? All the problems. Like, Jesus already came back. The story ended. They were in the last days, not us today. As Jesus is walking around and the apostles are walking around, they're telling people that they are living in the last days and the end of all things is at hand. Think about how delusional a person must have to be to think that that's literally speaking about 2,100 years later in 2019 or whatever it ends up being, 2,000 years later. Think about how crazy you have to be to think that, hey, we're living in the last days means 2,000 years. Hey, the end of all things is at hand means 2,000 years. Hey, live your life as though you aren't married because the time is short. That means 2,000 years for those first century people. How deluded and delusional do people have to be to believe in that kind of thing? So that's your first problem. The second problem is the fact that Jesus said he only came for Israel, and only Israel is standing in heaven at the end of the story in Revelation chapter 7 and 14, actually, and 21. It's everywhere. Paul said he only died for those under the law. Hebrews says he died for sins committed under the old covenant. It makes perfect sense that a perfect spotless sheep would have to die to replace all the imperfect sheeps or lambs that were sacrificed for the people of Israel. They were the only ones who had that sacrificial system. They were the only ones who had the covenants. They were the only ones who had the laws. They were the only ones who were promised the glory. They were the only ones who were promised the adoption, according to Paul. And they were the only ones who were promised that inheritance. They were, in fact, called God's inheritance all throughout the Old Testament. So how could anyone look at this story and say, gee, this gives me a ton of hope, right? This is certainly relevant to me today. It's certainly pertaining to things in the future. It's certainly not only about Israel. I mean, you just struck out. You're 0 for 3. Because it's all fulfilled. It has nothing to do with anyone today or in the future. And it literally is all about Israel. It's a Hebrew Bible, people. So the muddy and mucky system that is Christianity has so many holes in it, it's not even funny. And do you really think that God is going to judge people or condemn people or hold people accountable for not taking this story seriously? After seeing all these problems in it, I mean, good Lord, there's so many problems in it. Anybody with a brain logic and just a little tiny drop of common sense would look at this story and say, something's not adding up. Something is not right here. Okay? Why in the world is Jesus telling people that they're living in the last days? And here I am 2,000 years later, and I'm still alive, and I'm still waiting for this supposed promise. Why in the world would he do that? Why couldn't he be a little bit more specific? Why couldn't he make it a little bit more explicit and known that this is actually about me today? Do you really think that God is going to hold people accountable for using their flippin' brain? For using a little bit of logic and common sense, which supposedly he gave us? Right? I mean, you get these people, oh man, you're Israel only. Oh no, you're full preterist. God is going to judge you. Ooh. Yeah, give me a break. All right? We're looking at a story for what it says. Not for what we want it to say. Not for what we've been taught it says. We're looking at it for what it clearly says. And here's the situation, okay? If for some strange, wacky, crazy reason that this story was true, okay, and that it did somehow extend thousands of years beyond the last days, and that it wasn't only about Israel, even though Jesus said he only came for them, and somehow it includes me here, November, whatever the heck it is, 2019, if that is the case, and I die one day, and I float up to those pearly gates, or I float down wherever I'm going, and I stand in front of the gates, and God says to me, dude, you screwed up. If I can speak, if I can say something, I will promise you that I will say this. I will say, what in the world were you thinking? What in the world were you thinking? Giving people a story that is so delusionally confusing. What were you thinking, God? Couldn't you have done it a better way? If you truly loved me, if you truly cared for me, if you truly knew that I was lost, cursed, and needed salvation, then why wouldn't you have given me something better? Why wouldn't you have given me something more concrete to understand? Why wouldn't you have given me something more relevant to my time frame in which I lived? Instead, I had to look through old, ancient writings that are 99.99999999999999999% all about Israel. Okay? And I would have to pick and choose and flick through and read around and decipher with a magnifying glass very carefully where I fit in. Right? And find those couple passages that just give me a little light of hope and say, oh, there I am, or oh, there I am. Right? Why would that happen? Why couldn't you have done it a little differently? Why couldn't you have helped a brother out? Why couldn't you have made a story that didn't say that they were living in the last days just before the temple fell? Why couldn't you have said that the last days were going to be, a ways away? Why couldn't you have given us revelation when I was alive? Why couldn't you have kept prophets going? Why couldn't you have shown miracles and healings and all sorts of stuff on a grander scale so that everybody could see it and nobody would doubt? Right? Why couldn't you have done all these things? Yet, here I am standing before you, God, and you're telling me that I'm guilty. Guilty for what? I'm guilty for using the brain that you gave me? For using common sense and logic when reading an old book? So, folks, that's all I want to rant about today. Just get you thinking a little bit. It's ridiculous how people can act as if this story actually makes any sense whatsoever to them. Okay, they acknowledge that it's pretty much all about Israel, and then they argue with you that there's a few places that are about them today. It's a pipe dream. All right, now, and I'm not saying this to discourage anyone or take anyone's afterlife hope away. No, this is not why I do this. I do this because I think that the whole system of religion is bozo. It's wackadoodle. Okay, it makes no sense. It keeps people in bondage. Okay, it gives people a warped view of humanity. I love my family to death, but a lot of them think that humanity is cursed, and they look at humanity and they think that people are cursed, and then, I would turn that around and ask them, like, well, what about, my grandmother who passed away? What about her? Was she cursed? She was the sweetest little human that you could ever imagine. She did no wrong in my eyes, okay? She stayed in her house. She cooked. She cleaned. She planted flowers. She painted. She didn't harm a fly. She loved feeding people, helping people. She was a perfect human in my eyes, in every sense of the word. Yet, you're trying to tell me that that person was cursed, and that person was vile, and that person was wicked, and that person needs salvation. Give me a break. Give me a break. The whole system is delusional. It makes no sense. There are so many wonderful humans in my life, I don't even know where to begin if I tried to list them all. People that would just do anything for me, or anything for anybody. They give their shirt off their back. Loving, good people. And guess what? They're not Christian. They're not Christian. All right? So Christianity, in my opinion, is completely false. It's completely delusional. It's built on a totally muddy and mucky and crumbling foundation. I do believe in God. I do believe that there is a God who hears. I do not know how that works, nor would I ever attempt to try to explain it. But I sure as hell won't cling to a book that makes no sense. Hope you all have a wonderful day, everybody. Don't forget to give it a like, a rooski, thumbs up, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't. We'll catch you on that flip side. Bye-bye.